Hello, my name is Dahlia, and I came home from the army thinking I'd surprise my family, but instead, I heard my grandmother screaming. They told me she slipped, but the look in her eyes said otherwise. The house I grew up in, my home, was no longer mine. My photos were gone, my room erased, and my name cut out of the family picture. Then I found the pill bottles, the forged papers, the fake smiles. They said I abandoned her. But what if I was the only one who came back in time? What were they really doing while I was gone? And why? Does no one else in this neighborhood want to talk about it? I remember the sound my boots made as they crunched over the gravel in the driveway. Sharp, deliberate, too loud for a house that once felt like home. The porch light flickered like it didn't recognize me. I stood there for a moment, hand gripping the duffel strap on my shoulder, and waited for something. Anything. A bark. A voice. A creak from the old rocking chair. Nothing. 7 years in active duty had prepared me for almost every kind of silence. Desert quiet, jungle quiet, even battlefield quiet. But this silence sat on my chest like a weight I hadn't trained for. I reached under the chipped corner of the window frame, fingers brushing against the spare key that had always been there. It was still taped under the sill, but the tape was newer. Someone had replaced it. Not me. That alone should have meant something. The door didn't creak when I pushed it open. It used to groan like an old man clearing his throat. Now it moved too easily. The scent hit me first. Vanilla lavender candles and lemon-scented wood polish. Isolde's signature. My sister-in-law always did like the smell of effort. The furniture had been rearranged. My mother's ceramic vase was missing from the hallway table. A family portrait now hung by the staircase, freshly framed. Merrick's family, not ours. Him, Isolde, and their son, Kieran. My face wasn't there, not because I wasn't home yet, but because someone had actually cut me out. The shape where I used to be was still visible if you looked close enough. Jagged edges around Merrick's elbow where my arm had once rested. I hadn't been back to Flagstaff in years, but this wasn't about time. It was about erasure. I set my bag down gently against the wall, the only sound in the room. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Merrick emerged first, older, hairline retreating, but still trying to hold authority in his walk. "You're early," he said flatly. I stared at him for a beat. "Nice to see you too." Behind him, Isolde followed. Her hair was pinned back, her blouse tucked in just so, like she had come from one of her committee meetings. "We weren't expecting you till the weekend," she said, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's just, things are a little busy." "Where's Grandma?" I asked, not in the mood to unpack pleasantries. Isolde glanced toward the hallway. "She's resting. We've had a long day." Merrick nodded toward the living room. "We set up the couch for you, just for tonight. The guest room's a mess." Of course it was. My old room wasn't a room anymore. It had become a storage closet, or worse, someone else's hobby space. But I didn't argue. I just walked in, eyes tracing the unfamiliar contours of the home that once raised me. Later that evening, I wandered to the back hallway, passing by the closed door to Grandma's room. A soft hum of the TV came from behind it. The house was eerily neat. No scattered books, no misplaced cushions, not a single misplaced mug. Too clean, too sterile. I tried not to read into things. Tried. But sometime around 2 in the morning, that sterile calm shattered. The scream was sharp, thin, and filled with panic. It sliced through the walls like glass shattering on tile. I was off the couch before I even knew I'd moved. I followed the sound down the hallway toward the laundry room. The door was ajar. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. There, crumpled near the washing machine, was Grandma. Althea Greaves wasn't the kind of woman who ever looked small. She had towered over my childhood with her wit and warnings and the kind of love that didn't need sugarcoating. But tonight, on that cold tile, she looked like a crumpled napkin, fragile and discarded. She was shaking. Her nightgown clung to her thin frame, and her hand gripped the corner of a laundry basket like it was a lifeline. I rushed forward. "Grandma!" "Stop!" Isolde's voice came from the door behind me. Calm, detached. I turned. She stood there, arms crossed, not a hair out of place. "She slipped. Happens a lot lately," she said. "Her legs aren't what they used to be." I ignored her and knelt beside Grandma, gently touching her shoulder. Did you hit anything? Does anything hurt? Grandma didn't answer. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her eyes flicked between me and the door. Her wrist was already bruising, the skin beneath showing that deep purplish bloom that comes from something more than a simple fall. She's fine, Isolde said, stepping in now, crouching beside me. We'll help her back to bed, but please don't overreact, Dahlia. You just got here. I turned to look at her, dead in the eye. She screamed. Isolde didn't flinch. She forgets things. She gets disoriented. It happens. Maybe it did, but not like this. Merrick arrived a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from his eyes like he hadn't heard a damn thing. What's going on? He asked. She slipped, Isolde repeated, already lifting Grandma's other arm. I helped them carry her gently down the hall, ignoring Merrick's vague attempt at small talk. In her room, once she was settled, I sat beside her until she drifted off. Her breathing was shallow but steady. One hand remained curled near her chest, like she was holding on to something invisible. I didn't go back to the couch right away. I paced the hallway, stopped by the old bookcase that used to hold our photo albums. Now, it was lined with trophies that didn't belong to me. Kieran's spelling bee plaques, Isolde's framed awards for community involvement. My childhood had been packed away, possibly donated, or worse, thrown out like it never mattered. Eventually, I sat on the couch, the cushions too stiff, the air too cold. I leaned forward, trying to slow my breathing. And that's when I saw it. Just under the coffee table. A drawing. Crayon on thick paper. A child's scribble of a smiling woman and a boy, holding hands. To Grandma, from Kieran, it read. That wasn't what broke me. It was what I found taped behind it. It was a folded piece of tape, barely clinging to the back of that crayon drawing. The kind of tape a kid might use to hang artwork on a fridge. But behind it, pressed to the wood, was a small envelope, yellowed, slightly bent, like it had been hidden there longer than it should have been. My name was written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. Dahlia. Just that. No sweetheart. No love you. Just my name. And that was enough to make my fingers tremble. I didn't open it right away. I slipped it into the back pocket of my jeans and leaned back on the couch, staring up at the ceiling fan. It wasn't spinning. The silence in that house never really stopped. It just changed shape. At night, it hovered. The sun came up while I was still wide awake. I hadn't even taken my boots off. By the time I stood and stretched, the smell of eggs and coffee had already crept in from the kitchen. I followed it, slowly. My body moved on autopilot, but my brain was still in yesterday. My hands itched to do something. Clean a weapon, fold a uniform, check a perimeter. But I was home. Supposedly. Grandma was sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over a cup of tea. Her fingers toyed with the rim, turning it ever so slightly in place. She didn't look up when I walked in. Morning, I said gently. She blinked slowly, eyes finding mine like they had to travel a long distance first. Dahlia, she said, almost a question. Yeah, I answered, moving toward her. Before I could get close, Isolde appeared from the side pantry, holding a blender cup. Morning, she said, chipper, like we hadn't just had a nighttime emergency. She's already had her shake and meds. I made her usual. We've got a routine, you know? I nodded, biting my tongue. She handed Grandma a small cup of something greenish-gray. Althea sipped once, then set it down with the kind of reluctance you only notice when you've watched someone drink happily before. The pill bottle sat next to her cup. Different color, different shape. I reached for it casually, like I was going to throw it away. Isolde's voice shifted. That's her new prescription. We had to switch. Old one made her jittery. I glanced at the label, doctor's name I didn't recognize. Prescription date? 2 weeks ago. Where's Dr. Lowe? I asked. Isolde shrugged, feigning casual. He moved clinics. This one's easier. Plus, we've got refills all set up. No hassle. She said it with the ease of someone used to explaining themselves without being questioned. Merrick walked in then, still in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair a mess. Coffee? Third cabinet, Isolde answered without looking at him. He nodded and went straight for it. I pulled out a chair across from Grandma and sat. Her eyes didn't meet mine again. She just sipped her tea, slow, methodical. Her hand shook slightly with every lift. No one said anything for a full minute. "So," Isolde finally said, sliding eggs onto plates. "How long you think you'll be staying?" I kept my tone neutral. "I took a leave. Not indefinite, but long enough to help." "Help?" She laughed lightly. "Well, you're here now. That's already something." Grandma flinched. Barely, but I saw it. Merrick sat down beside her and grabbed the remote for the small TV on the counter. "Weather says frost tonight. You know what that means. Blankets out." He didn't look at anyone when he said it, just pressed buttons. Breakfast passed in silence after that. I didn't eat much. The food felt foreign, and I didn't trust what I couldn't pronounce in that pill bottle. When the plates were cleared, I offered to walk Grandma back to her room. Isolde paused, but gave a tight nod. "Keep her calm. It's nap time soon." "Got it," I said without looking back. Grandma leaned on me as we moved slowly down the hall. Her frame felt lighter than I remembered, like something had been taken away piece by piece. In her room, the curtains were drawn halfway, the air slightly musty. I helped her sit on the edge of the bed. She reached for my hand. "They said if I talk too much," she whispered, "they'll take my things. They'll make me forget again." Her voice cracked on the word, forget. My chest tightened. "Who said that?" I asked. She shook her head. I leaned forward, wrapping my arms around her. She felt brittle, but still warm, familiar, real. Then the door opened. "Time for her nap," Isolde announced, stepping inside with a smile too wide for the moment. "You don't want to overstimulate her." She adjusted the blankets quickly, expertly, like she'd done it 100 times. Her hands moved fast, covering up everything. Even the conversation. I stood slowly. "She's fine." She was talking to me. Isolde gave me a look, just a flicker in her eyes. Of course she was. I left the room, but not before catching Grandma's eyes. They followed me to the door, silently pleading. In the hallway, I waited until Isolde passed, then doubled back to the kitchen. The pill bottle was still there. I slipped it into my pocket and went to the porch. The chill outside hit hard. I didn't mind. Pulling out my phone, I typed in the pill's name. It wasn't a memory stabilizer. It was a cognitive suppressant, not designed to help with age-related memory loss, but to slow brain activity, dull emotional reaction, blur clarity. It was for keeping someone quiet. I checked the label again. The prescribing physician wasn't from Flagstaff. The refill location, a drive-through pharmacy 2 towns over. I sat there for a long time. Across the street, Odette was raking leaves. Her posture stiffened when she saw me watching. She turned back toward her door, pulling the rake inside without a word. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about one house. The whole neighborhood was holding its breath. I didn't sleep that night. But I did remember something I had forgotten, where Grandma always hid the originals. It came to me somewhere between midnight and whatever hour the birds started calling from the trees outside. I was lying on the couch, my back stiff from the worn cushions, and my fingers kept tracing the folded envelope I still hadn't opened. It was like my body remembered what my brain hadn't yet sorted, where she kept important things, the kind of things you didn't want others to find. Back when I was 13, Grandma used to tell me, people hide secrets in plain sight. You just have to know which drawer isn't for silverware. She had a way of being both playful and dead serious at the same time. By mid-morning, after Isolde and Merrick had left for errands and Kieran was at school, the house was mostly quiet, except for the rhythmic sound of Grandma's breathing from her room. I tiptoed upstairs and headed to the hallway cabinet near the attic door. The top shelf was lined with boxes labeled in bold black marker, holiday decor, winter coats, Miss. I reached past them, fingers brushing the back panel, and gave it a slight push. It gave way just enough, just like I remembered. A slim folder slid out from the hollow space, plastic, cracked at the edge. My stomach tightened. I brought it downstairs and spread its contents on the dining table, keeping an ear open for any car pulling back into the driveway. My hands moved fast, but my mind slowed to a crawl. One paper, then the next. Some were old, bank statements, birth certificates, a yellowed copy of the deed. But one page in particular didn't match the others. A revised power of attorney, dated 3 weeks ago. Grandma's name was spelled wrong. Althea had an extra E, and her signature looked suspiciously even, like it had been copied from somewhere else. I grabbed my phone, took photos of every page. Then I opened one of Grandma's old birthday cards she had written me years ago. I held the two signatures side by side. They weren't the same. I'd seen Grandma's signature my whole life. There was always a small loop on the G in Greaves. Always. The one on the new document had none. It was flat, rushed, artificial. I took a slow breath, then tucked the folder into my backpack. It was too important to leave lying around. After a quick check on Grandma, who was still asleep, I headed to the attic. The last time I'd been up there, I was maybe 16, dragging down boxes of Halloween decorations with Merrick while arguing over who got the last Kit Kat. Now, I climbed the steps alone, pulling the attic string light and blinking through the dust. Stacked neatly in the back corner were cardboard boxes marked Donate. I crouched down and opened the top one. My breath caught. There was my diary, faded purple leather cover, bent from being jammed into my old backpack. My drawings were tucked inside, pages creased but intact. I flipped one open. A scribbled picture of Grandma and me sitting under the big oak tree in the front yard. She was holding a pie. I was holding a book. I hadn't seen this in over a decade. Another box had a small bundle of letters tied with twine, all addressed to me, all unopened, postmarked from the year I left for basic training. Some were from Grandma. Some, I realized with a hollow ache, were never even mailed. There was a family scrapbook, too, missing several pages. Where there should have been pictures of my high school graduation, there was only a blank spot with ripped photo corners. My name had been covered with stickers in the caption space, like someone had tried to erase the memory altogether. I didn't cry. Not yet. I packed the diary, the letters, and the scrapbook into a spare box and carried it down slowly, making sure nothing would tip or fall. Once back in the living room, I sat on the floor and opened the diary to a random page. September 15th, 2006. They act like I don't matter, like I'm just here taking up space. But Grandma always looks at me like I'm still worth something. I turned the page. October 3rd, 2006. When they don't want to hear your truth, hide it until you're louder than their lies. That sentence pulled the air right out of my chest. I had forgotten writing it, but it rang like a bell now. I knew what I had to do. Not yell, not fight, not scream like they expected, but collect, document, verify. I opened my email, created a new folder, and uploaded everything I had so far. Then I encrypted it and set up a backup autoforward to a trusted contact back on base. If something happened to me or the files disappeared, the truth wouldn't. Merrick came home around 2. I heard the garage door, then the heavy thud of the back door closing. I quickly shut the laptop and slid the diary beneath the couch cushion. He didn't come in right away, probably unloading groceries or smoking one of his private cigars out back. I walked into the kitchen and reached for the fridge, acting casual. When he stepped inside, he paused, surprised to see me standing there. "Hey," he said, setting a bag on the counter. "You good?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Just cleaning up a bit." He looked at me a beat too long. "We weren't expecting you to stay this long." I shrugged. "I wasn't expecting to see my name erased from the family tree." He chuckled, uncomfortable. "That's not what happened. You know Isolde, she's particular about presentation." "Right. Must have been too particular for my face." He grabbed a soda and walked out without another word. Later that evening, I sat on the couch with Grandma again. She was more alert now. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long across the living room rug. I handed her a warm cup of chamomile tea. She took it slowly, fingers trembling but sure. I placed the diary in her lap. She blinked at it, then at me. "You kept this?" she whispered. "They didn't," I said. Her lips tightened. "They think I forget everything." "Do you?" "Not the important things." That night, I didn't sleep either. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, then reached under the couch and pulled out the diary again. I underlined that sentence with a pen, twice, and then I remembered something else. Grandma used to hide the originals, in the baseboard behind the sewing cabinet. So I waited until the house was still again, until the breathing from the bedroom softened and the creaks of the old pipes were the only thing moving in the dark. The old clock in the hallway struck 2 a.m., with its stiff, metallic clangs. That's when I got up. There was no need for shoes. I padded barefoot toward Grandma's room, careful not to press too hard on the middle floorboard. It always gave a loud moan, and Isolde had ears like a fox when she wanted to. The door to Grandma's room wasn't locked. It never had been. She never liked barriers. But the feeling inside had changed. Once warm and lined with books, now it felt like a hospital wing, clean, neutral, stripped of memory. I moved to the old knitting cabinet in the corner, crouched low, and pulled open the drawer. The familiar scent of cedar and something faintly herbal hit me instantly. Beneath a worn stack of yarn, next to a cracked pincushion, was the thing I had hoped to find. A small black voice recorder. It was the one I'd given her after I left for the army. She'd never been much for phones. Said she preferred her thoughts spoken, not typed. I used to joke that she'd leave behind hours of memoirs someday. I never imagined they'd hold anything else. I clicked play. At first, it was just silence. Then the sound of drawers being opened, footsteps crossing a room. Then a voice, Isolde's. "You think Dahlia's gonna swoop in and fix this mess?" Her tone was tight, clipped, like someone fighting to stay calm. "She forgot about you the minute she got her boots on that bus." A loud thud, like a drawer slammed shut. A pause. Then Grandma's voice, softer but clear. "She never forgot me. You did." That line sat in my ears like a held breath. My hand curled tighter around the recorder. There was more. Fragments. Isolde saying things like, "We have to be smart about this," and "They won't question it if it looks clean." But nothing was as cutting as that one exchange. I uploaded the file to 3 different cloud drives before sunrise. Copied it onto a USB. Hid the USB in the spine of one of Grandma's hardcovers in her room. One she always kept near her bedside. The secret garden. Fitting. By the time Merrick stumbled into the kitchen yawning, I had already written out a detailed timeline. Everything I'd seen since coming home. Every inconsistency. Every shift in tone. Every bruise. That afternoon, while they were out, I crossed the street. Odette's house sat diagonally across from ours. Her lawn was always tidier than ours, her windows usually dressed in sheer white curtains. She was the kind of neighbor who knew the mailman's schedule and always wore socks with her slippers. I'd known her since I was a kid. She used to slip me strawberry candy through the fence when Grandma wasn't looking. She was on the porch when I stepped up, watering her plants even though they were clearly fake. "Odette?" I called gently. She looked up like she'd been caught stealing. "Hi there," she replied, her voice guarded. "Didn't expect to see you walking over." I climbed the steps, pulling the recorder from my pocket. "Can we talk?" Her eyes dropped to my hand, then back up to my face. "I don't want to get involved." "I think you already are," I said softly. "I just need to know. Did you see anything? Anything at all?" She looked over her shoulder, like someone might be watching, then back at me, her eyes filled, fast and sudden. "I saw her fall," she whispered. "Well, not fall. I saw someone push her. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe she tripped, but she didn't." "Did you see who?" Odette closed her eyes. "I don't want trouble, Dahlia. I've lived here too long to start picking fights now. And your brother, your sister-in-law, they have a way of making you feel crazy if you say the wrong thing." "I get it," I said, and I did. I knew how people like Isolde operated, with smiles and perfect sentences, with concern and routine. They didn't need to shout to silence people. They used image, reputation, appearances. Odette paused, her hand tightening around the hose. Then she said, "If you promise not to put my name on anything unless you absolutely have to, I'll write it down. What I saw. What I heard." "I'm not here to ruin reputations," I replied. "I'm here to protect what's left of mine." She nodded once, That was all. Back at home, I typed out everything Odette told me and saved it. I was building something, piece by piece. Not a case yet, but a pattern, a picture. That evening, while Merrick and Isolde watched TV in the living room, some documentary about retirement strategies, I went to my room. Or, well, the couch. That was my room now. I pulled out a notebook, tore out a page, and wrote a single sentence. You have until Friday to come clean. After that, I'll make sure everyone hears what Grandma's been too scared to say. I folded it, walked to the hallway, and slipped it under their bedroom door. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't expect one. But I should have known better. People like them don't come clean. They cover deeper, and when a woman who's been silenced for years says, "It's time," you listen. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. The way she said it, calm, certain, almost relieved, told me everything. Grandma didn't say things just to say them. She spoke with purpose, and she'd waited far too long for someone to hear her. By the next morning, the letter I'd slipped under their bedroom door had disappeared. Not a word was said, not over breakfast, not while folding laundry, not even when I crossed paths with Isolde in the hallway and we locked eyes for a second too long. She just smiled. That tight-lipped politician's wife kind of smile. The one that says, "I'm not rattled, you are." Around noon, I overheard Kieran talking to Merrick about a school presentation at the community center that night. Something about senior family appreciation. I wasn't on the email chain. I wasn't in the loop. But I caught enough. It was a neighborhood event, grandparents being honored, families showing off their perfect units. The kind of thing Isolde lived for. She loved microphones and low lighting, staged compliments, and curated applause. I confronted Merrick about it while he was in the garage, tinkering with his toolbox, like he'd ever fixed anything without Googling it first. You planning on mentioning the event anytime soon? I asked, leaning against the frame. He barely looked up. It's more of a community formality. You know how those things are. I raised a brow. So formal you forgot to mention it? He sighed like I was exhausting. Look, we didn't think you'd be interested. You just got back. From across the room, Isolde's voice drifted in. Honestly, Dahlia, it's mostly just for the folks who've been here. You weren't around, and these things, they highlight consistency. I crossed my arms. Consistency or control? She didn't respond. Just closed the dryer and walked out. By 6 that evening, we were all dressed and in the car. Well, not all. I drove separately. I figured I'd had enough of shared spaces and tight smiles for one lifetime. The community center smelled like lemon floor cleaner and over-applied perfume. Families milled about in their best cardigans and church dresses. There were tables with paper programs, centerpieces made by middle schoolers, and banners overhead that read, "Celebrating Generations of Love." Love. Sure, I found a seat in the back. No one offered to save me one up front. I didn't expect them to. The event kicked off with a slideshow. Soft piano music playing over photographs of families posed beside porches, holding hands in hospital rooms, cutting cakes together. Then came the Varen segment. Photos of Merrick and Isolde escorting Grandma to charity events. Kieran reading to her in a rocking chair. Merrick handing her tea. Althea smiling faintly in every frame. And not a single image of me, not from childhood, not from holidays, not even from the summers we'd spent at the lake when I was the one pushing her wheelchair across gravel paths and into shade. I wasn't just absent, I had been edited out. Even in the group shots, you could see the awkward spacing, like someone had taken scissors to the past and pressed delete on anything that didn't serve their version. I didn't flinch. I didn't look around to see who noticed. When the lights came back on, Isolde stepped up to the podium. Good evening, friends and neighbors. Tonight, we're so proud to recognize not just Grandma Althea, but the heartbeat of our family, our son, Kieran. He's not just a straight-A student. He's what holds this family together. Applause. Cameras clicked. Kieran looked down at his lap, his face a mixture of pride and discomfort. Then they wheeled Grandma up. She looked exhausted. Her eyes darted through the crowd, searching. When they met mine, something shifted. After the claps faded, I leaned over. Why do they keep saying he's the light? She whispered. You were my son. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. That sentence alone burned brighter than anything in that slideshow. I kissed her forehead. Let's get you home soon, I said. After the speeches ended and the crowd began to mingle, I made my way to Isolde. She was in the middle of accepting compliments from two PTA mothers when I handed her the USB drive. She blinked. What's this? I leaned in close. Just something I think the school board might want to hear. You know, if they ever wonder what your community values really sound like behind closed doors. Her smile froze. She didn't say a word, didn't have to. On the ride home, Merrick and Isolde talked about how lovely the event was, how well Kieran spoke, how honored Grandma must have felt. I sat silent in the back seat, watching streetlights flash across the window. Later that night, once the house had settled into its familiar hush, I sat beside Grandma and pressed play on the voice recording. I let it play out in full this time. No skipping, no stopping. She listened. No reaction at first. Then, when it ended, she reached for my hand and said, "It's time." And when a woman who's been silenced for years says that, you don't ask questions, you act. I waited until the next morning, when the rest of the house was still slipping out of sleep and into their routines. Merrick had always been a late riser, unless money was on the line. Isolde moved early, but she stayed downstairs in her morning robe, hunched over her phone with a mug of something green she insisted helped reset the gut. It gave me just enough time. I noticed the door to Merrick's makeshift office left slightly ajar. That wasn't like him. He locked his glove box, let alone anything with a drawer. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe it was carelessness. Either way, I stepped inside. The room smelled like printer ink and old receipts. A half-built model airplane gathered dust in the corner, probably Kieran's from 3 summers ago. Merrick always started hobbies. He never finished them. I crouched at the filing cabinet and opened the top drawer. The files were labeled neatly: tax, property, insurance. I flipped through until I saw one marked POA. Power of Attorney. The top page was crisp, professionally typed, and notarized. I read the header. Power of Attorney, full rights, Althea Greaves. Dated just over a month ago. The signature at the bottom made me stop. It was supposed to be Grandma's, but it was perfect, too perfect, almost like it had been printed. The lines were uniform, without the slight tremble her hand always had, and worse, her name was spelled wrong. Althea. A mistake she never made, a mistake no one in the family should have made. My throat tightened. I flipped through the rest of the folder. There were signed checks, property disclosures, even a copy of the revised deed listing Merrick and Isolde as joint successors. The original, older version had me as a contingent beneficiary. They'd erased me, not in argument, not in conversation, but in ink. I shoved the papers back and kept digging. Behind a stack of outdated tax forms, I found a second folder labeled Private. Inside were pages of credit card statements with balances so high I had to read them twice. Names of luxury retailers, cash withdrawals in Vegas, payments to something called Heritage Life Fund. Then came the worst one, a second mortgage document, taken out under Grandma's name, using this house as collateral. My mouth went dry. They hadn't just tried to take her assets. They were draining her, using her to gamble, to look successful, to save themselves. I took out my phone, snapped photos of every document, front and back, then backed them up immediately, twice. By the time I stepped back into the hallway, I felt different, not angry, not sad, focused. That night, while the dishes clinked in the sink and Merrick watched TV with his feet on the ottoman, I sat at the dining table pretending to go through old mail. Isolde walked past, paused, then said it without blinking. "You've been snooping." I didn't even look up. "I've been protecting. There's a difference." She tilted her head. "Protecting what? Your pride?" I looked her in the eye now. Calm, measured. "No. Her, and everything you've been trying to take from her." She smirked. "Dahlia, you have no legal authority here. You've been gone. You gave that up when you left." "I left to serve my country. You stayed to serve yourself. She laughed, soft and condescending. So dramatic. Honestly, no one here thinks you're a threat. Good, I said. Then you won't mind if I go public with what I've found. Her smile froze, but only for a second. That's not how families handle things. No, I said. That's how thieves get exposed. She walked off without another word. But I could feel the tension in her shoulders. An hour later, as I was refilling Grandma's water in the kitchen, I heard Merrick on the phone in the garage. The door wasn't shut all the way. I leaned in. We need to accelerate the transfer, he said. She's on to us. She's not buying it. Silence. Then, no, she hasn't shown her hand yet, but she's digging, and if she finds the old copy, this could get messy. I slipped my phone from my pocket and hit record. He didn't know. After dinner, I pulled everything together. I opened a new folder on my laptop. Safeguard Grandma. Inside it, I dropped photos of the forged POA, screenshots of credit card debt, scanned second mortgage papers, audio clip of Merrick's call, recording of Isolde threatening Grandma. My timeline of events, names, dates, shifts in Grandma's behavior. I copied the folder to 3 flash drives. One I kept with me, one I stashed in the attic under a loose board. The third, I tucked into the spine of Grandma's old hardcover, The Secret Garden, and slid it back onto her shelf, just in case. Before heading to bed, I walked to the living room to check on Grandma. She had fallen asleep in her chair with the TV still murmuring. I turned the volume down and whispered, "We're close." But I had no idea. They'd already started trying something else. Reckoning had a deadline, Friday, and I wasn't the only one keeping track of it. The very next morning, I woke early, not because I couldn't sleep, though sleep had been scarce lately, but because something told me I had to. It was like my nerves were wired to an internal alarm that didn't trust clocks anymore. I made coffee in silence, watching the steam curl in the pale morning light spilling through the kitchen window. Grandma was still asleep. Merrick had gone for one of his stress relief jogs around the block, and Isolde was glued to her laptop, fingers flying like she was saving lives. Probably just organizing the next round of lies. I grabbed Grandma's tablet from her side table, pretending to check the weather, and instead pulled up her smart home app. She didn't even know it was still connected. Isolde must have thought no one would remember it ever existed. Under Devices, I found a list. Thermostat, porch cam, doorbell cam, and something odd. A disabled entry labeled Living Room Cam V2. I tapped it. Status, archived, storage available. I dug further, entered the backup credentials I'd helped set years ago, and boom, access. The most recent clip was time-stamped from 10 days ago. I hit play. At first it was nothing, just the living room, bathed in soft afternoon light. Grandma sitting on the couch, knitting, the TV murmuring something in the background. Then Isolde appeared, arms crossed. "You haven't signed it yet," she said, stepping closer. "I need time to read it," Grandma replied, voice quiet but firm. Isolde scoffed. "You don't need to read anything. You need to do what's best for this family." "This house is mine," Grandma said. "You don't get to scare me out of it." Isolde moved closer, leaned in, her hand tightening around Grandma's arm. "It's not yours anymore, old woman. It's ours. Sign it, or things get uncomfortable." The next thing I saw was a blur, Isolde yanking the papers from Grandma's lap, and Grandma flinching. I downloaded the footage before I could even think, saved it in every place I could, cloud, flash drive, even emailed it to myself. This wasn't just tension anymore, this was proof. By noon, I was in my car heading toward the law office that used to handle Grandma's affairs. It was across town, tucked behind a florist and a tax prep service that hadn't changed its signage in over a decade. The receptionist, a woman named Cheryl I vaguely remembered from years ago, looked up from her computer with a polite smile that faltered as soon as I said my name. "I'm here to see Mr. Halpern," I said. She hesitated. He's no longer practicing." "Excuse me?" "He retired. Abruptly, 2 weeks ago." I blinked. "He was fine a month ago." "I know," she said, eyes darting to the hallway. "He packed everything up and left. Didn't even leave forwarding information." You're telling me he just vanished? I'm telling you I'm not supposed to talk about it. I stood there, stunned. Back in the car, I called his number. Disconnected. The voicemail box wasn't even active anymore. I drove back in silence, fingers tapping the steering wheel. My thoughts were racing faster than the tires. When I pulled into the driveway, Kieran was sitting on the porch, headphones in, gaze lost somewhere in the distance. I walked past him, but he looked up. "Hey," he said. "Can I ask you something?" I stopped. "Sure." He stood up slowly. "Are you going to show people that video? The one of Mom and Grandma?" I studied him for a second. "Do you think I should?" He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. "I think you're the only one who would." He didn't wait for a response. He just sat back down, earbuds in again. Inside, I printed stills from the footage. Clear, undeniable images. Isolde grabbing Grandma's arm, the signature lines on the papers, the look on Grandma's face. I placed one in an envelope and walked to the driveway. Isolde's car was parked there, shiny and perfect, as usual. I tucked the envelope under her windshield wiper. On the outside, I wrote one sentence on a yellow sticky note. "I don't need to go loud. I just need to go first." That night, after Grandma went to bed and the house dimmed, I was lying on the couch when I heard it. The creak of Merrick's footsteps. I sat up before he knocked. He didn't wait to be invited in. "You think this is a game?" he snapped, voice tight with panic. "You think you can ruin us over a few misunderstandings?" I stood, slowly. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's fraud. It's elder abuse. It's theft." He stepped closer. "You're acting like some kind of hero, but you don't know half of what you're talking about. I know what I've seen. I know what I've recorded. And I know you're scared." His hands balled into fists, but he didn't raise them. "This could destroy everything we've built." "No," I said. "You did that when you decided her life was a resource you could mine." He stared at me for a moment, chest rising and falling. "People don't forget things like this," I added, "and neither will she." I didn't yell. I didn't need to. He left without slamming the door, which told me he was afraid of what else I might have, and he should have been. Friday morning came, and with it, the weight of finality. Not panic, not fear, just a strange stillness, like the quiet you feel just before a storm hits. The kind of quiet you grow to recognize after years of knowing what storms look like when they're personal. I called the social services office that morning from the porch, speaking low, careful not to be overheard. The coordinator I'd spoken to before, Lena, sounded alert the moment I mentioned Althea's name. "She's not on our active case list," Lena said, typing in the background. "But she's been flagged as high risk by another department." That was all I needed. By 2 p.m., Lena and a licensed family therapist arrived at the house, unannounced and unexpected. They had credentials and soft, composed voices, the kind trained to walk into tense environments and not spark immediate combustion. Merrick and Isolde weren't home. They had taken Kieran to piano practice, which meant the house belonged to us for a few hours. I brought them inside and guided them to the den where Grandma sat in her recliner, a blanket tucked up to her chest. She looked small that afternoon, smaller than usual, like her body knew something big was about to be pulled out of it. Lena sat across from her, smiling gently. "Miss Althea, do you mind if we ask you a few questions, just to understand how you've been feeling lately?" Grandma's eyes fluttered, then landed on me. I gave her the smallest nod. They started slow, routine questions. How she slept, if she ate regularly, how often she left the house. She answered softly, a little slower than usual, but clear. When the therapist asked about her medication, she hesitated. "They gave me new ones," she whispered. "Said the others were making me confused." "Who said that?" Lena asked. "Isolde," she replied without blinking. "She gives me all the pills now." "And have you ever felt pressured to sign something you didn't understand?" Grandma paused. For a second, I thought she wouldn't answer, but then, "They made me sign things. They said if I didn't, I wouldn't get my pills." Lena glanced at the therapist, then at me. My heart was pounding, but I kept my arms crossed to hide it. That sentence changed everything. By that evening, a temporary freeze had been placed on all accounts tied to Grandma's name. Isolde's access to her prescriptions and medical decisions was revoked. A formal investigation had been opened. When Merrick and Isolde returned from the piano recital, they knew something was wrong before they stepped through the door. The official envelope taped to the front porch, marked "Urgent," did the talking. Inside the living room, they read it in silence. Their expressions didn't crack, not completely, but Isolde's hands tightened on the paper, and Merrick's jaw locked like a vice. No one spoke. They simply walked past me and into the kitchen, the sound of the fridge door swinging open like a slap. But that was just the beginning. The community family event that night, the one where Isolde was supposed to receive the Caretaker of the Year award, was canceled hours before it began. No explanation was offered, but the flyers disappeared, the Facebook event was deleted, and whispers began. Fast, subtle, then not so subtle. Wasn't she the one with the grandma? Did you hear something happened with her finances? I heard the whole house is under investigation. It was amazing how fast reputations unraveled when people started talking instead of pretending. That same night, I was stepping out of the community center after dropping off paperwork with Lena when Merrick cornered me by the car. "You humiliated her," he snapped. I didn't flinch. "No, I stopped pretending for you." His face reddened. "This is your family." "No," I said. "It's your scheme, and it ends here." He slammed his palm against the car roof, hard enough to startle a couple nearby. Then he stormed off. And when I got home, Grandma was sitting by the window, humming quietly, staring at nothing and everything all at once. Her blanket was pulled around her shoulders like armor. "The last time I sang that, you were 5, she murmured. "I remember," I said. "You braided my hair that night." She smiled faintly. "You cried when I tucked the end too tight." I sat beside her and held her hand. "Then let's make a new memory of it," I whispered. The sun dipped behind the trees. For the first time in a long time, the house felt like it had room to breathe. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from our attorney. "They're offering mediation. No court, just a signed settlement." I looked at Grandma. She was still by the window, eyes half closed, listening to the breeze against the glass. "Do we settle?" I asked. She turned to me, eyes suddenly sharp. "No," she said. "We live." We lived, like Grandma said we would, but the living wasn't easy, and it wasn't smooth. It was slow, uneven, like trying to walk again after a long time in bed. There were good days and heavy ones, but at least now, the air didn't feel like it belonged to someone else. A week after Merrick and Isolde moved out, I was dusting the bookshelf in Grandma's room when I knocked over one of her oldest hardcovers, To Kill a Mockingbird. It hit the floor with a soft thump, the kind of sound that usually doesn't mean anything, but something slipped out from between the pages, a folded note, faded, creased like it had been read and reread a dozen times, then hidden again. I opened it. "If they ever try to erase you," it read in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting, "remember, I wrote your name into the walls of this home." Beneath the sentence was a 6-digit code. A combination I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, when she used to keep old insurance forms and her wedding ring locked away, in case anything ever happened. I stared at it for a moment, then went to the closet in her room and pulled back the rug. In the far corner was a steel safe, dusty but solid. The dial still turned smoothly. I entered the code, breath shallow. It clicked open. Inside were stacks of papers, yellowed legal documents, family photographs, and a cloth-wrapped bundle of recipe cards tied with ribbon. I picked through the contents, careful not to disturb the order. Near the bottom, I found what I didn't realize I had been waiting for: the original will. Handwritten, dated, witnessed. Grandma had left the house to me. No joint ownership, no power of attorney redirects, just my name. With a note in the margin, "Because you'll protect it like I did." I sat back on my heels and let myself feel it. Not triumph, peace. When Merrick and Isolde came by to collect their final boxes, they didn't look me in the eye. They didn't speak to Grandma. They moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, removed. Kieran was with them, standing awkwardly near the front steps. He didn't follow them inside. He just glanced at me. I gave him a nod. He nodded back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Once the house was empty of their things, I opened the hallway closet with Grandma and pulled out the old paint cans. The walls were chipped and faded, the old color uneven where family photos had once hung. We started repainting the hallway together, one wall at a time. Her hands weren't steady anymore, but she refused to sit and just watch. She dipped the brush, made small strokes, smiled when the paint smoothed out just right. We rehung the photos after. I had gone through every box in the attic, every album, every drawer. There was one picture in particular, me at 8 years old, covered in dirt from playing outside, still in my muddy uniform from junior field camp, grinning beside Grandma, who held my hand like it was something sacred. We framed it and put it back in the hallway, in the very center. "That's the one," Grandma said. "That's how I remember you best." Weeks passed, and the noise finally faded. No more legal letters, no phone calls, no social media digs. People in town shifted their gazes when they passed me, but a few began to nod again. A couple even waved. I started volunteering at the local Veterans Garden. They were looking for someone to help coordinate weekly meetups for retired women in the community. Grandma came with me every Thursday. She'd sit in the shaded corner with her crochet, watching, sometimes offering unsolicited advice to the new volunteers. "This one overwaters," she'd whisper, not unkindly. "That one's got a temper like a cactus." The community welcomed us slowly but sincerely, and I didn't feel like I had to explain who I was anymore. Just showing up was enough. The silence that used to haunt the house turned soft, comforting. The kind of silence that meant rest, not repression. One breezy afternoon, Grandma and I sat on the porch. The wind picked up gently, tugging at the leaves. She was wrapped in her shawl, holding a cup of weak tea she barely sipped. "I never thought I'd feel safe in this house again," she said, staring out toward the street. "You didn't feel safe," I replied. "Now you are." She nodded. Her fingers brushed mine. A car passed slowly down the block. Inside was a familiar face, Isolde. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She just drove on, eyes fixed ahead. Grandma looked away. I didn't. Because there's a difference between forgetting and choosing not to forget. We didn't get everything back. Some things stay gone. But in that house, on that porch, we had what mattered. And when a home remembers your name, even the silence starts to feel like love. Sometimes the people who say, "We're doing what's best for the family," are the very ones tearing it apart behind closed doors. This story isn't just about one woman reclaiming her voice. It's about how truth, no matter how buried, will always find its way back. So what would you do if the people you trusted the most were the ones writing you out of your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that reveal the quiet strength behind everyday battles.